VR gaming is incredible, but the truth is, even after 7 years of consumer VR headsets, we don't have enough high quality games releasing to keep me using my headset. Luckily, the VR modding community has never been so big, and with all the insane amount of mods for existing VR games, and mods that add VR support to games that don't support it out of the box, there is always something to play. So let me go over the many different games and mods that are available to keep us gamers entertained. Two of the biggest VR games are Skyrim and Fallout VR. Bethesda were actually big supporters of VR in the early days, porting and releasing VR games on a regular basis. And to this day, Skyrim and Fallout are the biggest VR games out there in terms of playtime. But the VR ports themselves are pretty basic. In Skyrim, the melee is poor, with no real thought put into balancing the gameplay, so you can walk around sword waggling if you want. Fallout VR has the most basic gun handling. Luckily, both games have already got a massive modding community, and both of these games, Skyrim especially, have been completely transformed over the years into something so much more. These games and mods probably need their own dedicated video, but just some of the mods include VRIK, which adds full body and arms, so you don't just have floating hands. Immersive blacksmithing, where you can craft and enhance weapons with your own hands rather than using menus. There are mods like Plank that add full physics in the game, so it's much more like Blade and Sorcery, where weapons actually collide with enemies and they ragdoll based on where you hit them. There are even new mods in development that use AI, so you can walk up to NPCs and actually have a conversation with them. Fallout 4 has VRIK, which like the Skyrim mod gives you arms instead of just floating hands, but it also lets you two-hand weapons, massively improving gunplay. There are mods that improve the scopes, overhaul for VATS, which make it more like bullet time and much more fun in VR. Both games have also got loads of visual mods, which can really transform the games to make them look much better in the headset. Another early VR game that really embraced mods is Pavlov, a PvP first-person shooter. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that without mods and modders, Pavlov would not have been a very popular game. It was very light on content and just nailed the basics. Because VR was so new, players were desperate for a good VR shooter, so people jumped on board and started importing maps from other games, including Counter-Strike maps. And Pavlov basically became Counter-Strike in VR. It's evolved way beyond that now, with so many different mods from Call of Duty maps to entire modes like role-playing levels with servers full of people pretending to be human beings. Other VR shooters have followed suit, with Contractors being my personal favourite. I made a separate video just about this game because it was struggling with very low player base, but they launched it on Quest and added really good mod support, and now it's thriving. Not only can you import maps, but it's got loadout mods, which completely change up the weapon sets, movement speeds, and how high you can jump. And now you've got complete overhauls with Team Fortress 2 modes, which have got all the classes with their respective weapons and movement abilities, Halo loadouts, and Star Wars Battlefront loadouts. It continues to grow, and the quality of the mods are outstanding and feels like you're playing a completely different game as you jump between servers. What about if you want single player shooters? Well, Half-Life Alyx has mod support, and this includes editing tools, which enable modders to take all the pre-existing assets that Valve made for the main game and use them to make their own levels. I remember the first time I tried some of these out, and I was completely blown away by the quality of the levels, and they massively exceeded my expectations. I've now got over 70 hours in Half-Life Alyx, and only 15 of those were in the main campaign. There's a real mix of levels as well, with some feeling like extensions of the main game, with literal multi-hour campaigns to play through, as well as smaller levels that are trying to change up the gameplay to something different, like the Gunman Contract levels. I made a video going over some of the best mods, so we'll link that in the description. BoneLab also has built-in mod support. I've been a bit disappointed with the mods for this game, with most of the mods being avatars, so you end up looking like Spider-Man or Ghost from Call of Duty. I was hoping for something similar to Half-Life Alyx, where you've got some really well-made levels with mini campaigns to play through, but that hasn't really happened yet. Blade and Sorcery is a melee physics-focused VR game that also really embraced mods, and just like with Pavlov, modders really got behind this game and made it so much more than it could ever have been without them. This is a sandbox game, and most of the mods fit with that sort of gameplay, so it's mostly weapon packs and other gameplay tweaks, but there's still some really great mods like the weapons from Doom Eternal, a complete gun handling mod which adds the ability to import guns into the game, and if you like just messing around in VR with no real purpose or goal, then Blade and Sorcery is going to be your jam. Battle Talent is a new physics melee game, but this one does actually have a campaign of sorts. It's a roguelite, but you do progress through chapters and levels and unlock more and more weapons and abilities. And they've also got mod support, so you can change up the look of the enemies, add new weapons, and it's also got a sandbox mode that you can play around with, as well as procedural dungeons to play through. Hellsplit Arena is a stunning VR melee physics game, and mod support is in the works, and it looks like they're going the extra mile to make the mod support the best it can be. They're developing something called Workbench, which will allow you to not only import your own weapons and enemies into the game, but you can use the in-game assets and models that they created for the main game and make your own levels similar to Half-Life Alyx mod support. They've already shown off some footage of a mod that's in development which will be a full single player campaign with talking NPCs. They've also built a framework for modern firearms, so it won't be limited to just melee fighting. Modders could literally make a VR shooter with the tools that they have. They've got a car with full physics that will be drivable, and this game's also built in Unreal Engine, so modders will have access to a massive amount of free assets and free resources through Epic. It's really going to be interesting to see how this develops in the future. Another genre that's been massively improved through modding is rhythm games. I remember when Beat Saber released, I enjoyed it, but the music wasn't really my thing. It only took a few days before someone made modding tools that let people make and import their own beat maps, and it snowballed from there with dedicated sites like Beat Saber that let people upload and share their maps, and other people could rate them. And eventually you had browsers that you could literally download songs directly in the game. I've got over 80 hours in Beat Saber, and the vast majority of those are playing custom songs. Other rhythm games with mod support include Audica, which has you shoot to the beat rather than slice through them. This also has a strong modding community, although it's not as big as Beat Saber. Pistol Whip has just had built-in mod support released, with tools that give people the ability to take all the enemies and assets from the game and map out their own levels. They can either remix existing songs from the game, or they can import their own, and there are already a few decent maps available through the built-in browser. There's also another category of mods though. The ones where some talented people have managed to mod in VR support for a game that doesn't actually have a VR mode. There are actually a lot of them, and the list keeps getting bigger and bigger. If you're looking for survival games, then you've got Valheim, one of the most popular survival games that can be played with up to 10 people. The mod is really well made with full body and arms. You have to physically swing melee weapons, and the bow and arrow works as you would expect, with you needing to pull back the bow to aim and shoot the arrow. 7 Days to Die is a recent mod that has VR support, again with full body and arms, melee swinging to fight off zombies, and this game is mostly focused on crafting and base building, as you've got 7 days to build and fortify a base. You can do it solo or with friends in an open world environment. Once the 7 days are up, a horde of zombies will attack, and each cycle gets harder and harder. Raft is another survival game, but this one as you start off on a raft with up to 3 people, and you have to scavenge for materials by throwing out a hook and reeling in floating wood and plastic on the ocean. It's all physical paced, so you throw out the hook or thrust a spear into a shark with your hands using motion controls. Outward is an RPG survival game that can be played solo or co-op. The non-VR game is third person, and it's been converted to first person with motion controls. It's still in development and it's a little rough around the edges, but so was Valheim VR when that was released, so keep an eye out for updates if you want to wait, or dive in now and just be prepared for some clunkiness. Subnautica actually has official VR support, but it wasn't the best. In fact, there's already a mod that improves on this, which moves the PDA back so it isn't right up in your face, as well as a few other improvements, but recently there's been a new mod which now adds motion control support. You can aim your hand with a laser pointer to select things, then aim and build. You can grab hold and steer some of the vehicles with your hands, but the most of the gameplay is still the same, and you just use the motion controls as a gamepad, so you press a button to mine or attack. It's still a massive improvement over the original VR support, and it really improves immersion. The sequel, Subnautica Below Zero, never launched with VR support at all, but thankfully this was moderned back in, but this is like the original, so it's gamepad and mouse and keyboard only. So what about shooters? Probably the best VR mod ever made is Half-Life 2, Episode 1 and Episode 2 mods. These are the most complete and native feeling mods available, with many comfort features like snap turn and teleport, whilst also letting people play with full speed and all the vehicle sections if they want. You've got manual ladder climbing, manual reloads. It's the complete package, and I personally found the overall gameplay more enjoyable than Half-Life Alyx. There's also a mod based on the Half-Life 2 VR mod for Black Mesa. This is still in beta, and it's based on an older version of the game. It does have quite a few bugs still. Some of the AI is broken, and the guns are based on Half-Life 2 guns from the VR mod, but if you ever wanted to play Black Mesa in VR, this might be the closest you will get. Another bunch of mods right up there with Half-Life 2 are the Resident Evil mods. These allow you to play Resident Evil 2 and 3 Remake, as well as 7 and 8, all in VR with motion controls, and you've got two-handed gun aiming and a bunch of other quality of life features, and playing these games in VR is something that I'll never forget. Left 4 Dead 2 has got a VR mod. It's not quite as polished as some of the others, but it's still incredible fun, and it looks surprisingly good in VR for such an old game. It's fully functional online, but you have to be running a private server to not get banned. Metal Hellsinger also has a VR mod with motion controls. This is a fast-paced shooter like Doom, but you have to shoot to the beat whilst heavy metal music plays. The only thing to note on this one is that it doesn't really run great, so you really need a very high-spec PC to make the most out of it. GTFO also fits into this category, but if you can get it running well, it's a great team-based tactical shooter where you have to escape whilst fighting off some ugly monsters. This game really requires teamwork, as you get limited ammo and you will die if you run around shooting everything. There are a couple of roguelites available. Gunfire Reborn has a Borderlands style look to it. It's pretty fast paced, where you have to go from level to level and see how far you can get before you die. You unlock more skills and abilities and then you try all over again. This game also supports co-op. Risk of Rain 2 was originally third person, but an excellent VR mod makes it first person with motion controls, and it's very fast paced and frantic. Deep Rock Galactic is a procedural co-op shooter with destructible levels, where you have to mine for resources to upgrade your gear whilst fighting galactic space aliens. This is a very polished mod, which has been whitelisted by the devs themselves, so it's fully functional online. You can play Doom 3 in VR, both on PC and the Quest, and both mods have motion control support, although the Quest version has got some nice extras like two-handed guns. Half-Life 1 has got VR mods on PC and Quest as well. And just like Doom 3, the Quest version is more polished and feature-rich. The Quest mods are actually made by a group of modders called Team Beef, and some of the other mods include Return to Castle Wolfenstein, the Quest series with Quest 4 currently in development. These mods are Quest only, but some of the mods are starting to come to PC, which I will talk about in a minute. Crysis and the original Far Cry recently had VR mods, made by the lead programmer of Half-Life 2 VR mod team. Crysis is only for the original, not the remaster, as that's the only one with open source available, so you won't be seeing a Crysis 2 or 3 mod anytime soon. The original Crysis still holds up today though, and it looks great in VR. You can play this with a mouse and keyboard or gamepad, but it did add some basic motion control support as well. Your right hand basically aims the gun, but there's no room scale, no two-handed weapon support, and the in-game arms move with the gun, so if you twist your wrists, the arms will move around independent of your real body. I did try this with a gun stock, but the lack of any room scale was an issue for me, as I like to play standing and physically turn, which obviously doesn't work at the moment, so this is definitely best played seated with smooth turn. The original Far Cry mod only just released, so it's mouse and keyboard only for now. I believe that it has started to work on motion controls, just don't expect it anytime soon. If you don't mind playing games with a gamepad or mouse and keyboard, then you should definitely check out Wolfenstein New Colossus. This also has a VR mod, and this game is absolutely crazy in VR, with some really impressive environments and set piece moments. Raicuparta, an excellent VR modder, has made mods for a bunch of games. Some of them are free and some of them are still paid through Patreon, or you can buy them separately through itch.io. But he does end up putting them out for free eventually. Outer Wilds and Firewatch are both free and they're excellent. Outer Wilds is a particular highlight where you get to explore different planets on foot and then jump into a spaceship and fly somewhere else. Even just flying around and landing on these different planets is a treat in VR, but the game has also got a mystery to uncover, so it's part exploration, part detective game. Firewatch is a well-known walking simulator which looks great in VR, and I really love the end section. The current paid mods are Stanley Parable Deluxe Edition, Neon White, Shipbreaker and Trombone Champ. Neon White is a real highlight. It's a platforming speedrunning game where you have to use power-ups to go through levels as fast as possible whilst killing demons along the way. Trombone Champ is also really fun. It's a rhythm game where you play a trombone and you have to move your hands back and forth to make the notes. It also sounds hilarious. Final Fantasy XIV, an MMO which stands for Massively Muscular Orifice, has a VR mod. This is the only mod in existence that works with this type of hole. It does support motion controls, but I imagine most people will just play it third person with a gamepad, especially when in combat. There are also a couple of cockpit based games. MechWarrior 5 has got a VR mod allowing you to control a massive mech in 3D, and Kerbal Space Program, which is an excellent mod with full motion control support, which allows you to actually flick all the switches and turn all the dials with your hands. I already mentioned the Team Beef ports earlier, but there are a couple more worth mentioning. Bendy and the Ink Machine got a VR mod for PC, which also has motion controls. This is an indie horror game set in a cartoon-like world, and Jedi Knight and Jedi Outcast have got VR support converted into first person with full motion controls, so you get to use lightsabers to deflect lasers and slice through stormtroopers. These are originally only Quest only, but Jedi Knight 2 is actually getting a PC port, and some of their other ports are potentially coming to PC in the future. Some other mods with motion control support include Life is Strange. Tormented Souls is a Resident Evil inspired indie game which has a VR mod with motion control support. If you don't mind playing games with a gamepad or mouse and keyboard, then there are a bunch of mods available. Alien Isolation has a great mod. The RE framework from the Resident Evil VR mods also supports some other RE games. Monster Hunter Rise and Devil May Cry 5 both work in VR with 3D, but they're exactly the same as a flat game, so third person. You can also play through Resident Evil 4 Remake using the mod in third person as well. Descenders, a downhill mountain bike game, has got basic VR support. You do need to have strong VR legs for this one though. There are also a bunch of games playable in VR through Luke Ross's Patreon. These are Elden Ring, Cyberpunk 2077, Final Fantasy VII, Grounded, Spider-Man, Hogwarts Legacy, High on Life, Atomic Heart, Dark Souls, Ghostwire Tokyo, and recently the Uncharted games. One thing that I have to say about these mods is that obviously they are paid, but you do get access to a lot of mods for the money. They are using a technique called alternate eye rendering, which displays the image in one eye, then it switches it to the other. This can make things juddery if you can't hit high enough frame rate, and it causes issues with ghosting and other artifacts which can ruin the image. Most of these games are very high and require a high-end spec PC, so if you don't have a 4000 series card, ideally a 4090, I would probably give them a miss, unless you don't mind putting up with low resolution image and potentially poor performance. Mods are getting released all the time, and a lot of them we don't even know about beforehand, but I do know of some that are in development. Portal 2 is getting a VR mod, based on the Left 4 Dead 2 mod. This is already very functional, with fully working portals in stereo, motion control support so that you aim and fire with portals with your hand. It's currently getting some bugs fixed, and some nasty crashes, and then some sort of public release will be soon. Ready or Not has got a VR mod in the works, which is being modded privately by some very experienced VR modders. The game developers were actually very open to the mod, and put the VR plugins back into the files with an update, and have said that they're going to whitelist the mod when it's ready, so that online play will be fully functional. I have no idea when this is going to be done, and the modders want to do it in private in their own time, so there's no pressure. So it's one of those that it'll be ready when it's ready type of things, but I can tell you from what I've seen, it's going to be one of the best VR mods ever made. The Unreal Injector has been talked about for a little while now. If you don't know what this is, it's an injector for Unreal Engine 4 and 5 games that lets you inject VR support into literally hundreds of games. This is due for a release this year, but no fixed release date yet, and don't expect it for at least a few more months. But it's definitely going to be worth the wait. The mod has got some incredible features, and more are getting added. Recently, Praydog figured out a way to universally add room scale support to games, so you can now play stood up and physically turn your body, and the in-game model will follow you around. There's also a motion control mode, which allows you to aim and shoot with your hands, and you also can switch from one-handed aiming or two-handed aiming, which feels very nice. This is 3'd off though, so don't expect it to feel native VR. So basically, the aim follows your hand movement up, down, left and right, but if you move your hands forwards and backwards, the gun doesn't follow your movement, and if you twist your wrists, then the gun will move left and right, as if you're fully moving your hands side to side. I think there's still some improvements to be made with this, but we'll see how far Praydog can push it in the future. The reality is that without modders and this incredible community, VR, PC VR especially, would be in a very bad place right now. There simply aren't enough good native VR games releasing to keep me playing on a regular basis. Most that do come out are very short, so you end up playing them over 2 or 3 days and you're left with nothing else to play again. And that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and an extra special thanks to my patrons and YouTube members for supporting me to make more videos like this.